Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And hello again, and welcome to Dark Window. I am Jim Mann, your host, and with me here in the studio today is someone most of you know, if not all of you, Richard Dolan. Now, unless you are new to the whole business of UFO and UAP research and investigation, I just want to say that Richard is one of the leading researchers, historians, and a writer of many, many subjects of UFOs. And today, there is actually no aspect of the phenomena that Richard will not study. So welcome, Richard. And how are you doing today?
Hi, Jim. Hey, thank you. Very glad to be part of your new show. It's an honor.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to our conversation, Rich. And I'm going to get this thing rolling right away. And, you seem to always be up on the latest. So to you, today, what is the latest in UFO and UAP research going on right now? Are we talking about what came down with Congress here a couple of months ago? Or what's the latest?
Yeah, thanks. And again, I'm glad to be here. As anyone who's been following the UFO subject probably caught the fact that in May, the U.S. Congress had a one morning hearing on what they are now calling UAP. They don't seem to use the word UFO anymore, but UAP, okay, fine. Yeah, that was interesting. I don't. It's a funny thing because for years and years and years and years in American history, going back to the 1950s, the dream had always been to have Congress openly have hearings on UFOs. And we had this, and, it's like, I don't really think most people were even paying attention to it. And I don't really think a whole lot really came out, but it was interesting. It was a one morning thing. You had two representatives of the Pentagon, Ronald Moultrie and the other gentleman's name. It'll come to me in a moment. But the two of them were talking about, yes, there are UAP reports. We actually do have them. So on that basis, that was a very nice thing for the public to hear, that there are UAP sightings that the military has. Mostly they talk about the Navy. Of course, as I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have picked up on this, the way that they're talking about these objects, it's as if we've gone back to the 1950s. So they'll say things like, well, yes, there's something out there, but we don't think it's alien. And they actually said this explicitly a number of times. And they give this idea that, well, maybe it's the Russians and maybe it's the Chinese. And, well, we don't really know what these things are. We'll have to investigate further. And I'm just thinking, who is actually believing these statements that you guys have no idea what you are dealing with? That's actually just so ludicrous, but they get away with it. They just say what they say, and they have a very compliant and ignorant media for the most part. Media doesn't really know much of anything. And so, and that's where we were at. So it was basically 90 minutes of a lot of talking to Congress. There was one or two questions from members of Congress that was somewhat interesting. Was represented by the name of Gallagher. I think he's a Republican, and he actually brought up the Wilson Davis memorandum, yes. The note by Dr. Davis. Yeah, so that was the high point.
One of the things that Richard, one of the things that sort of bothered me and still does, and I realize that there is a very genuine interest in national security, but a lot of the questions, maybe not a lot, but a number of those questions that were asked, they pretty much alluded to the fact, well, let's talk about that behind closed doors. And maybe you remember that they were going to have another session off camera
I think they did. Yes.
I had a
same
problem
day.
with that. And I think many people did, because this should be transparent and open. So, I met the pilot, Commander David Fravor, up in McMinnville a few years back.
Mhm.
And he, of course, was the pilot of that F-18 Hornet back in, what was it, coming off the Nimitz.
Yeah, November 14th, 2004, the Tic Tac
Yeah, it was
incident.
04. And when asked what he thought about, was it a foreign adversary? Was it something, a black project or something? He says, no. He says, whatever this was nothing that we had ever seen or ever heard. Or I just hope it's on our side, whatever it is. And I mean, it took those guys by surprise so bad. And here are our top guns. The United States Navy top guns are baffled by this. How can you?
Well, that's 2004. And for the record, not China and not Russia in 2004 had anywhere remotely the capability to fly something like that. Or would they have had the political will to do so either? It was a different world in 2004.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, the United States military, you could argue black budget technology might have had something to do with this, but I don't buy that either. And here's the thing. Back in the 1950s, there are people wondering about this subject then and with secrecy around it. So there was a scientist by the name of Robert Sarbacher, who among UFO geeks, a lot of people will know Sarbacher's name. He was a brilliant defense contractor scientist. And he had a meeting in 1950 with a Canadian government employee named Wilbert Smith, who was also very interested in these flying saucers, UFOs. And here's the thing. Years later, Sarbacher was found by a couple of UFO researchers, Stanton Friedman and William Steinman. And this was a fascinating thing, because he confirmed that he had met and talked about this with Wilbert Smith back in 1950, and he knew about crash retrievals. Sarbacher was very, very well connected. And what he said with the UFO secrecy program was that John von Neumann was definitely involved in the program. He said definitely involved. Now, for people who don't know, John von Neumann gets a lot of people's vote as probably the single greatest intellect of the 20th century, above Einstein, a lot of people will say.
Oh, wow.
Neumann was, to call him a genius doesn't do justice to this man's intellect. Every other genius who met Neumann always said they felt inferior next to him. He just had everything. Plus, from what I heard, he was a real social guy. He liked to party a little bit. He had fun, but he was just an off the charts genius. And so, and really the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, among other things. So for Sarbacher to say that the greatest mind of the 20th century, John von Neumann, was definitely involved in these flying saucers, that gives anyone a very clear idea about how important these UFOs were being taken by the U.S. scientific community. All right. He also said Vannevar Bush, who was the leading, he was FDR's leading science advisor. He became a leading science advisor to Harry Truman. He was definitely involved. And then he said Robert Oppenheimer. He said, I think Robert Oppenheimer was involved also, although he couldn't remember for sure. Oppenheimer, of course, another high level genius. So the U.S. defense establishment was bringing in its top scientific people at the very beginning to study and understand this UFO situation. So to fast forward 60 plus years, 50, 60 years, and you get to someone like David Fravor in 2004, which itself is almost 20 years ago now. It's incredible. And for these top gun pilots to know really nothing about what is going on out there, that's a shocking thing. Like, can you imagine would people 50 years ago have thought, or 70 years ago have thought, yeah, we're not gonna do anything about this in terms of our military and our pilots, and we're not gonna talk about this, and we're just gonna close our eyes and stop our ears, and hopefully it goes away. I mean, and that seems to be, at least from the point of view of these Navy pilots, what has happened. It's incredible, and they've kept it secret from themselves.
Let me shift gears here a little bit, and I don't want to get into a political conversation, but the U.S. presidents over the years, do you think it's a need to know even at that level, Rich?
No, not anymore. No, I think a lot of them are by design locked out of this.
You think so?
I do. I personally do. It depends, I think, on the president, and it depends on his will in wanting to know what's going on. That's what I strongly suspect. Now, it wasn't like that in the beginning. The early presidents during the Cold War and all of us, Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower, obviously, and even John F. Kennedy were definitely involved. But I think as early as Lyndon Johnson, so we're still in the 1960s, I think Johnson, by design, by his own decision, probably did not want to be deeply involved in the machinations of the cover-up. And which is interesting because Johnson was probably the most corrupt president the United States has ever had, ever. The guy was an absolute just flat-out criminal. But he was, and he controlled everything politically. But this subject, UFOs, I think he was not interested in getting his hands dirty. And then by the time with Nixon, who was right after him, we're early 1970s now. From what we've heard through sources like the late Ben Rich, formerly of Lockheed and Skunk Works, that he heard from Kelly Johnson. Again, this is rumor, but I think I believe this. By the time of Nixon, you've got an international, it's become more of an international control group, still U.S. dominated, but a lot of the information about this has already by then moved beyond the president. I mean, I spoke to one man about this years ago who knows a lot of those people. And he said, look, presidents come and go. Politicians come and go. But the people managing these programs, they're lifers. And he said some presidents are reliable and some presidents are not reliable. He said some drink. He actually said this to me. And some just are not considered trustworthy by the inner establishment. So I think this is what happened. And some of these presidents, I think George Bush Sr. was very much engaged in this. I think he knew probably everything there was to know. Bill Clinton, it's tricky. Clinton, was considered, some people said, oh, he's an outsider, but Bill Clinton was a total insider. And I think, I suspect that Bill Clinton knew everything that there was to know. But according to another thing that I was told by another high-level person who met with Bill Clinton during Clinton's second term, he said, I had 5 minutes to talk with Bill Clinton at this event. And he brought up UFOs, and Clinton said, oh, well, yes, I wish I could help there, but there's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. This was during his second term, so in the late 90s. And then you move onward. You move to George W. Bush. I don't know how much George W. Bush knew. The impression that I was given by one man I was speaking to is that Bush was not really engaged in or dealing much with the UFO program. Then you get Obama. Again, I don't know, but I don't think so. And then Trump, who of course was absolutely hated, still is hated by the national security community, a lot of the intelligence community anyway.
Let me just chime in just a second, Richard.
Yeah.
You have written a book about Trump, about the UFO. Isn't that one of your books?
Yeah, it's the UFO disclosure in the Trump era.
Yes.
I wrote it shortly after Trump was elected. So it was a little bit about Trump. It was mostly about the international structure of UFO secrecy at that time. But the thing is, yeah, with Trump, he was at war with his intelligence community for almost his whole term. the whole national security and media apparatus as well, of course, connected with that.
Right. Yeah.
And so I don't think, I mean, Trump was obviously interested in UFOs. He made a few statements where he clearly has an interest in this, but he did a very good job at keeping his, at least on this one, his cards close to his chest, because he really is not. He never gave up what his opinion was. Now that we have Joe Biden, look, I mean, whether you support or don't support Biden, it's obvious that he's not running any policy whatsoever. He's not able to. For national security, you got people like Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken, that whole diplomatic clown show. And then for domestic policies, you got other things going on. I just don't know how much Biden is engaged in this UFO subject at all, if even a little bit. So I think U.S. presidents are not any longer engaged in this. And,
I mean, if you go back,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it's very much what you're seeing in the Western world in general. I mean, look around at any of the European leaders of their national governments. I mean, these are non-entities, almost all of them. And I think that's by design. And I think that's the case with most of the other Western leaders, Australia, New Zealand, all the others. These are really puppets. They're not actual national leaders. So the question really comes down to who's running things. And this is a question that I am continually asking myself. Who is actually running the show? It doesn't really appear to be most of the elected national leaders, at least in the Western countries.
And of course,
you go to Russia, you go to China. I think their national leaders are running things.
And there, of course, there was always that famous statement that Ronald Reagan made to the General Assembly.
Yes, at the United Nations. That's right.
So he obviously knew something then, or was it the United Nations? Yes.
Ronald Reagan knew a lot about UFOs. He was a witness at least once, probably twice in his life, to some dramatic UFO incidents. The one that is totally confirmed is when he was governor of California back in the 70s, 1974. That summer, he was running for re-election and was flying he was on his way to some campaign thing in California, and he was in his small Cessna craft with, I think, 2 aides and the pilot, and they saw a zigzagging white object. Could have almost been a white Tic Tac UFO. And one of the coolest things Reagan did is he's looking at this and he says, "Let's go after it." And the pilot, whose name was Bull Painter, he talked about this in an interview. He said, "Yeah, I went toward it." He said, and then it just shot off faster than a speeding bullet. It was just gone, and it shot upward. But it was a heck of a thing. I think Reagan was definitely interested in UFOs, and that speech you're referring to at the UN from 1987, where he said something, "I often wonder how Earth would react if faced with the threat of an alien invasion."
Mm-hmm.
Now, in that speech, he covered his bases, and he followed up and said, "And what could be more alien than was it the threat of war and the threat of war?" So he took the edge off the ET part of it. But Reagan really was interested in the ET phenomenon, very, very much so. So, he talked about this a number of times.
I know there was a story about Nixon and Jackie Gleason and
Mm-hmm.
That whole business down, I think, somewhere down in Homestead, Florida.
Yep. Homestead Air Force Base.
Yes.
It's a story, and it's got people supporting it and trying to attack it. I tend to support this story. I think it's true. And so Gleason and Nixon, this was in 1973, I believe, and they're doing. They were good buddies, those two. And as some people might know, Jackie Gleason was deep into UFOs. One of the most knowledgeable people in the world among private researchers, anyway, relating to UFOs. He had a massive library of this stuff. He was a member of, I think, APRO and maybe some of the other groups. So anyway, he's friends with Nixon. Now that's interesting.
That's very interesting.
The fact that Gleason, this total UFO geek, for years and years and years, who had arguments and won arguments with U.S. generals, Air Force generals, about UFOs in the past.
That's interesting.
Like everyone knew this about Gleason.
Yeah.
So he's buddies with Nixon. So you have to assume that if nothing else, they had conversations about UFOs and aliens. I have no doubt about that in the least. But so here they are, they're doing a golf thing down in Florida, like a photo op. And after it, this is according to Gleason's wife at the time. Her name was Beverly McKittrick. And she wrote an unpublished memoir manuscript where she wrote about this. And apparently Jackie came back and he just, after his meeting with Nixon, and he started drinking, and he drank for like 2 days straight, got completely drunk. But what he said to her is that, yes, Nixon showed up and took him to Homestead Air Force Base alone. Nixon showed up without a Secret Service detachment, which we do know Nixon was constantly trying to escape his Secret Service detachment. This is actually a true thing about Nixon. Mm-hmm. People will say, oh, you can't escape from your Secret Service detachment. It's not true. Nixon did it several times. So Gleason said that he showed up alone, driving. They drove to Homestead, and Nixon was like, well, you know, you're so interested in this. Let me show you something. And he showed him alien bodies with Nixon, which Gleason said to his wife, at first I'm looking at these beings in a glass case. I thought, are these children that had some horrible accident? Why are they here? He said, and then I realized these were not children. These were aliens. And it really deeply affected him. What's interesting is that Gleason was a guy who had been studying this at that point for more than 20 years. And he was deep into the subject. But when you are shown the real thing, it's a shock to your system. So yes, I'll say I tend to believe this story. We don't have proof of it. I mean, I don't know how we can get proof of it after all these years. We just have her memoir. And we do know that Gleason was deep into UFOs.
Yeah, you know, when you hear stories, well, that's one thing, even though the story is coming from very credible people. But when you're standing there looking at the hard empirical data, it just changes your entire world. You've written a number of books. One I have always found very interesting was UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. Where are we at on that, Rich?
There's that cover, that Monty Python-esque cover that people have either loved or hated. Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite books. And I wrote that book because I wanted to have I wanted it to be the best overall introduction to the UFO subject that could be available in one volume. That was my goal. And so it's a little bit of everything. There's a lot of history in the UFO of UFOs in that book, not as much as in my 2 volumes of history, but it's still got a lot of history there. And I talk about other important things about the UFO subject, the science behind UFOs. It doesn't seem to make sense, but it actually does make sense. The history of ufology itself. It is how have we developed in our understanding of this fascinating mystery? Mm-hmm. That's in there, and the whole history of contact and abduction, and people have had experiences with these apparent aliens. All of that is in that book. And then I ended it by looking forward to what are the likely parameters of, will there ever be a UFO disclosure and that type of thing. So that's what's in that book. I'm actually creating an audiobook of it finally after all these years, and I'm reading it myself, and I'm almost done.
Oh, you have an audiobook of it now.
There will be one.
Great. One of the other publications, as a matter of fact, it was that double volume publication that you put out, is UFOs and National Security State. How up to date is that now? Would you go back and review that and revisit that? How would you say that what you wrote then stacks up with what's going on today?
What a great question. Well, in the first volume, which I wrote more than 20 years ago, I've often thought there are quite a few things in there that I would like to add that I just did not know when I was writing it in the late 90s. Writing that first book really was my education in the UFO field, to be honest. I started with essentially zero knowledge. I was at nothing. And I researched a lot. I did a lot of work in the process of writing that book, but there's a lot I did not know until afterward. So there's missing facts. In my opinion, there's things I could have added in there. Overall, I think it's still, even that first volume stands up very well. There hasn't been anyone since who's tried to replicate a history of that period. I don't know why. I certainly wouldn't want anyone, I wouldn't want to stop anyone from. It's been more than 20 years, and there really hasn't been a proper history written of that period since. The second volume, I think, stands up very well. That covers the period from the early 1970s to 1991, basically the end of the Cold War. And that second volume was honestly the most difficult book I've ever written. And I'm more proud of that single book than probably any other I've ever done. It was hard work. And I think it's the Green Book. I think it stands up well. So what I want to do is have a third and potentially a fourth volume of that series. And I know it's been many years since those two volumes have been out, but I'm not done with the research and preparation for follow-up volumes, which I think will be out before. I mean, I don't know when. I don't want to put a date on it. I used to do that, and that was always a mistake. But there will be a follow-up volume or two from that.
Well, you obviously must have a few irons in the fire today, projects that you're working on, Rich. Are you open to talk about any of those? Or?
Sure. Yeah. I have, my problem is that I have too many projects at the same time. But I mentioned I'm doing an audiobook creation for 21st Century Mind. I just read another chapter of that yesterday, and I just want to get it done. I'm close to being done with that. Mm-hmm. But I've also, I've been doing a tremendous amount of research for Volume 3 of UFOs and the National Security State. So that means covering all of UFO history from 1992. And then I just have to decide when I'm going to cut that volume off, because I was going to take it to the present, and I just think there's probably too much information. So I'll probably take it to 2009. I have a lot of research on that done. What I'm doing right now, though, is on my website over at Richard Dolan Members, I just recently completed a multi-part, I guess, mini documentary series on USOs. So basically think underwater UFOs, so unidentified submersible objects. And that's a fascinating history. So I just did a breakdown of I guess, about 75 USO cases from the 1940s till today. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'm going to do, in fact, I've already decided on this, is I'm going to put together a book, maybe a short book on that. I think it's timely because, you know, you've got right now the Pentagon is already talking about, in their latest iteration of their UAP task force, they're now talking about transmedium objects, that is underwater UFOs. Right. They're discussing this. And I think it would be timely to just remind them and remind the world that USO cases dealing with the military have been going on consistently since the 1940s, but actually even there's good cases even prior to that. But I have quite a few since the end of World War II. So I think it would be a good thing to put that together, and I suspect I will have that done before long.
Do any of those cases, those underwater UFOs, the submersible, any of them really kind of stand out in your mind as, oh my God, is probably the most sensational? Can you share with us?
Yes, I'm happy to. I don't know if there's any one that I'm thinking of. There probably is one if I were to really review them all. But what I can say is that there are a few places in the world that appear absolutely to be major USO hotspots. And so one is very close to the area we were just talking about a while ago, the Tic Tac UFO encounter, which was off the Southern California coast. Now, the Tic Tac encounter happened a little south of San Diego, basically off the Baja California coast. If you go now that's a big area there, but if you go north to the Channel Islands. So closer to Los Angeles, basically. There's you've got Catalina Island and Santa Clara Island off the coast there. And they're facing Long Beach and Santa Barbara, LA area. That's an incredible USO hotspot. And I've just, find case after case after case of objects coming out of the water, being seen going into the water, glowing fast objects going in and out of the water by Catalina Island, all through, especially starting from the late 1980s, early 90s, and then moving forward. And it has continued to this day. I'm looking at here, I'm just pulling this up as I speak to you. One of the leading folks at MUFON, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, has recently done a book on USOs where she's collected a bunch of these cases. And I like that book. And in that, yeah, I found one case of hers from MUFON. I think this is a MUFON case, and it's from June 14th, 1992 at Catalina Island, where she says numerous witnesses reported hundreds of UFOs rising from the waters near Catalina Island, hovering apparently momentarily, and then just rapidly accelerating into the sky. Total silence. A lot of the witnesses apparently filed these reports of that with police as far away as Malibu, which is, almost 50 miles to the north. The reports were forwarded to the U.S. Coast Guard, which refused to acknowledge that they were doing anything about it. And they just said, no, we're not investigating this. But that's just one. There are so many from Catalina Island. And then you get a lot also from Puerto Rico.
Really?
Many sightings by Puerto Rico. Now, if you go just north of Puerto Rico, you have one of the deepest trenches in the world under the ocean. It's called the Puerto Rican Trench, sometimes called the San Juan Trench. And that is the second deepest trench in the world, next to the Marianas Trench, which is a little bit deeper. But the Puerto Rican Trench is more than 26,000 feet down. So you're talking, what is that, more than 5 miles deep.
I think in the movie Hunt for Red October, don't they mention that trench?
I can't remember.
Do you recall?
I don't remember.
I mean, that's just.
I never read the book. I saw the movie. Movie was good.
Yeah, same here. I've never read the book, but I think that was that trench was a hiding place for the Red October in that movie.
Even they would be hard pressed to go down to the bottom of that trench. That's deep and tremendous water pressure. But anyway, that region, and also south of Puerto Rico, it also goes very deep, very fast. Lots and lots of USO reports throughout the years, and a lot of them connected with the U.S. Navy as well. So, and they're not all confirmed. I can't pretend that these are confirmed reports, but I do think that they're. I think they're true. I think these are true cases where you get, Navy people basically talking to their friends, and then the rumors, eventually they come to me, and so
you're the go-to guy. Yeah,
but yeah, I have one here that was given to me by a member of my website over at Rich Hill and Members, and she was speaking, and her details aren't the best, but I totally have no doubts at all that she's completely truthful here. She had a Navy friend who said, I was near Panama in 1990. So this is around the time of Operation Just Cause when the U.S. invaded Panama. A lot of folks remember that. And apparently this is a dramatic event where this immense stationary diamond-shaped craft was hovering over a very large U.S. naval vessel, perhaps an aircraft carrier, for several days. And he said to her, his job was to record events, including on video and perhaps infrared. And he apparently recorded this object. He said like certain things were done in response to the object. Presumably weapons were brought against it, but they said they had no effect. And at some point, the object apparently shot very high up into the sky.
Oh, really?
And then everything that he recorded was taken. And he was told never to discuss any of this. And that's basically all that she got out of him. But that reminds you again of the Tic Tac incident where You have claims, which I think are certainly true, by some of the U.S. Navy personnel that in the aftermath of the Tic Tac encounter, these guys in suits came in and they took all of the data connected
Oh,
to
really?
the encounter.
Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't Fravor himself stated he didn't believe that that was the case, but other members of the Navy and the USS Princeton crew especially made this claim.
Kevin
And
Day?
I believe it. It was Kevin. I think it might have been Kevin Day. It was definitely, oh golly, I can't remember all the names now. It wasn't Day. It was one of the other guys who've been interviewed. The name escapes me at the moment. I'm sorry. Someone in the comments below will mention it.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's often been said, and maybe this is still true, and with your research into the USOs, do we still know more about the surface of the moon than we do the floor of the ocean, do you think?
Oh, great question. Well, I don't know. The thing is, I'm sure the U.S. Navy and probably the Russian Navy also have the entire ocean floor mapped, probably completely.
That's what I'm guessing.
I can't think that I cannot think that there's a spot of the ocean floor that they have not mapped. So I suspect they've got a very good handle on it, because you don't have to go down to the bottom of the Marianas Trench to get some very good data about it. I mean, they've got sonar, they've got all kinds of electronic gear by which they can map that ocean floor and look for if there's an alien base down there, which I think there are alien bases down there. I would be very confident in saying that they know where they are. But having said that, look, the ocean's big and it is very forbidding. And it's not like you can just, even the regular ocean floor at 15,000 feet or thereabouts, that's not easy for submarines and for people to go down to that area. That's very inhospitable.
Oh, those pressures are unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And I understand that 100 and some miles southwest of San Diego, out in the ocean there, Catalina area, it's extremely deep there. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah. So you've got a shelf off the California West Coast that extends out for a little while, but then it just drops. It just drops down to ocean level. The entire Pacific Basin, it's all basically going to be 15,000 feet, give or take. Mm-hmm. Once you get off the shelf there, you're in deep ocean. Whether it's 15,000 or 20,000 feet, it doesn't make much of a difference at that point. It's very deep. That's many miles down below the surface.
So there's no telling what could be down there, actually.
Yes, well, we have story after story of U.S. Navy submarines encountering ultra fast moving objects down there. And when I say ultra fast moving, we're talking hundreds of knots per hour. That's hundreds of miles per hour. Not. I mean, the fastest submarine speeds, are probably classified, but more than 40 knots is probably not happening. I just don't. If it is, it's not by a lot. You've got torpedoes. I think the Russians or the Soviets had a torpedo that could move at, I think, 200 knots. That's the fastest thing that I'm aware of that's man-made that can move like that in the ocean. So that's 200 knots. That's very fast. But we've got claims of objects moving at more than 500 knots in the ocean that are, U.S. Navy ships are encountering.
The Shag Harbor
incident. I'm sorry?
Yeah. The Shag Harbor incident. There was reports that they had clocked an underwater object moving at extremely fast speeds. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah. Well, that's 1967. That's a long time ago. Right, yeah. And Shag Harbor is off the coast of Nova Scotia. And it's on the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia. So facing Maine, I guess you could say. That an object went into the water. It was monitored by the Canadian and U.S. Navy. In fact, the Soviets came into the area as well. They were interested, but they were
I did not know that.
They were escorted out by either the Americans or the Canadians, and they just kept at a distance while this was all happening. So the object was down there for several days. And Chris Stiles and Don Ledger, they were the two Canadian investigators of this case.
I like about you, Richard, that your memory is so vivid on this.
Well, I was just looking at this case recently too, though, so that helps. But thank you. But yeah, they're the two Canadian research. Chris Stiles still talks about this quite a lot, and he's probably the most knowledgeable person on Shag Harbor in the world. But they interviewed eyewitnesses after the fact, and I know that they had one eyewitness who said, yes, this object eventually left. It moved out of the harbor, out of Shag Harbor, out into the open water. And I can't remember when they talked about the speed. I'm not disputing you. I just don't remember the fast speed part of it. But I know that they said the object eventually exited the water, and it just took off. And that was that.
The story that I had read, and in agreement with what you've just said, the Granby was the name of one of the research ships that came in through there. It was I think it was Coast Guard. It was a Coast Guard. And they had actually recorded that whatever that object was down there, it met up with another object.
Yes, that's right.
It was almost like the first object, which is the one that was initially seen, was disabled of somehow, and a second object met up with it.
That seems to be, I think, the best guess on what happened. So there was an object that went into the water. Everyone saw this. It was at night. It was seen by a number of witnesses. It seemed to be having trouble, and it was underwater for about a period of a week. And I think there were actually as much as two other objects under the water that were detected in association with it, but definitely at least one. Yeah, that seems to be what Stiles and Ledger agreed on.
Well, we could talk all day on a number of different topics. I mean, we talk about aliens, conspiracies, you name it. You also was a co-author with producer Bryce Zabel, one of your other great books, AD After Disclosure. How long ago did you publish that book?
Over a decade ago now. My goodness. It's
quite
amazing.
a while.
It feels like a different world because I really loved doing that project with Bryce. We worked very, very closely together on that. We talked on the phone almost every day. We wrote that book. We did it on a shared document. We did it on Google Docs, actually. We really worked on it as a collaborative effort, 50-50. At the time, this was before the world really went kind of crazy with the intense levels of censorship that now exist all throughout social media, and the overt effort against so-called disinformation by Western governments. So it's different now. At the time, we were looking at YouTube and social media as positive possibilities for disclosure. We were thinking, well, with the world as it is moving now, we've got a world in which information is just being shared so readily. We both thought it would be a matter of time before some kind of sighting hits the sweet spot, so to speak, and gets recorded in just the right way and becomes an undeniable event. And that will force the powers that be to have to admit something. It's not that they would admit it of their own volition, but we thought, well, things are there's WikiLeaks now, we were saying, and there's everyone with a cell phone camera now, which by 2011, 2010, when we were writing this book, were becoming good, at the time. So what's happened instead is that the world has seen that a centralization of power by the Western governments over the internet. And we've seen it, ever since really even 2014, 2015. We saw this even before Trump really hit the scene politically. And so what we're now looking at is it's a situation where disclosure it's a tricky thing to for us to get now. I mean, I don't know how likely this is ever going to be, like a genuine disclosure of the UFO reality by the United States government. One of the things that we concluded in that book, which I think is absolutely right on, is the ultra revolutionary nature that a genuine UFO disclosure would be. Once we started looking at, because half of that book deals with how disclosure might happen, but then the second half deals with, if disclosure were to happen, how would it affect our world? How would it rock our world, essentially? And when we went into all of the elements of society that would be affected, we just thought, good grief, this would be the most revolutionary thing in the world. And then that answers itself. It's like, why is there secrecy? That's why there's secrecy. Disclosure of the UFO reality would change so many elements of our world. I think it would be very disruptive for the established power structure that exists in our world. I don't think they're interested in that. So that's what we concluded. And I think that's the case. So we're now in a world where we've seen a definite move by especially the Western governments against so-called disinformation, misinformation, and the like, with deplatforming and overt censorship and the like, and also manipulation of algorithms by Google and YouTube, which we've now been seeing more and more. So this is how they're handling it. It's they're moving toward a digital control over the entire world. I call it a global revolution, and that is what we are looking at right now. So it's kind of a foot race between the people and the elites. Can we achieve a breakthrough on this subject before they achieve their breakthrough and completely and fully lock down all venues of communication, which is certainly, I think, what they want to do. And it's serious because, well, I'll just finish this one thought, because the UFO subject, it's more than just sightings. I mean, I'm interested in the sightings. I'm fascinated by them, but we have to step back and ask, what do these sightings represent? Who are these guys? Who are the beings or people behind the UFOs? And one thing I just want to point out here, this has been a real emphasis of mine, is the sheer vast quantity of well-attested, well-recorded sightings around the world every year. Thousands and thousands every year. This is a global phenomenon that is recorded everywhere, mostly North America. We get recordings of it because there's more of an infrastructure for us here, but it's everywhere. And a large number of these sightings, my favorite ones to look at are the creepiest ones, where it's like 3 a.m. and this dark, silent object is hovering over your neighborhood. You get a lot of these reports. I go to the National UFO Reporting Center. I like to look at it, a lot of reports he collects. And there's a certain slice of sightings that are just that. 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, a dark triangle or a dark saucer hovering at 200 feet over a neighborhood. What the hell is that? So we need to understand who is behind this. What are they doing? This seems important to me, and it's being conducted with massive resources and extremely advanced technology by beings or by an operation that wants to be secret. So when you put those things together, we need to have a genuine public discussion about this. We need to be talking about this rather than just, oh, gee, I wonder what's out there. I wonder, what is that? Well, if we have enough resources, if you're the Pentagon, we'll figure this out. It's like, no. You've had 80 years. You know what it is. You can't deal with it. It's beyond them.
Yes. Yeah,
but this is the game they have to play.
Do you suppose, Richard, that, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but don't you think that there seems to be an effort to distract the general public away from what should be the news of the century?
Yes, always. Always. That's not just about UFOs. That's about every single thing. Every single thing. We have a docile public. We have a poorly educated public. They don't want to involve people in these discussions. Are you kidding? Like, that's the last thing they want. So that's been for our entire lifetimes and much more than that. There's no desire on their part to have an engaged public that actually is informed on this. God forbid. So no, the whole thing is just to put it to sleep. That's always been the goal. We know this from the 1940s and 50s. The infamous Robertson panel that was organized by the CIA in 1952, 53 was all about debunking this and using media sources back then to put UFOs to sleep as far as the public was concerned. So no, this has always been the case. And it's no different now, because the fact is there's nothing they can do about this. This is a problem for which they don't have a solution, I believe.
Exactly.
I think they don't have one. And so what are they going to do? Tell the world, yeah, there are these objects and beings that have total impunity to do whatever they want. They can hover over our military installations, over any place they want. And we really can't do anything about it. But don't worry, people. They're not going to eat us. Like, there's nothing that they can say that's going to make it. Because then there's abductions. People want to talk about this. They will want to talk about that. If there's an acknowledgement that there are other beings here, think about what that would do to the conversation about abductions.
People do not like to be taken out of their comfort zone.
Oh, no. And but abductions happen. Like, that's a real thing. And so these are very uncomfortable subjects. And for political institutions, once they openly discuss something, that means they have to do something about it. That's the problem. If you acknowledge that this is real, if you're the president or some other important person and you acknowledge it, then you're going to be expected to have a plan to deal with it, which this is in our ridiculous dumbed down world. People expect, oh yeah, politicians are supposed to have solutions to every problem. Well, not every problem's got a solution. And this is one that doesn't. So they're paralyzed. That's really the problem. They're just paralyzed.
Well, Richard, in conclusion, because we're running up on time here, is there anything that you are currently involved with that you can share with us? Maybe you already have anything that you think is worthy of telling us here on the program.
Sure.
That you're up to.
Well, I still keep busy. I mean, we're in the COVID era still, so I don't fly a lot. However, I do video conferences like this, and I'm quite happy with that arrangement. By the way, I don't miss all of the flying, and I have no desire to fly in 2022 with the airline industry being what it is. I'll pass. But I do get involved in various virtual events from time to time. But as far as my main efforts are concerned, I work at my website at Richard Dolan Members. I do all of my work there. Some of it is behind a paywall. Some of it is not. Oh, thank you for that. And I encourage people to go check it out. There's a lot of free content there, as well as members content. But I write articles and create video content and audio content there all the time. And the other main thing I'm working on are the book projects.
Okay.
So the USO book I mentioned, I'm still continuing with my research in Volume 3 of National Security State. And believe it or not, I have a couple of other book projects that I just want to get out. They all take a little bit of time. There's too many projects, but I will be busy for the rest of the year writing them.
Well, great. And Richard, we got to wrap it up here. So I just want to say thank you for joining us on our show. Maybe we'll have you again. Hope so. Okay.
My pleasure, Jim.
Yeah.
People should know, like, you and I have known each other for a long time. And I've always enjoyed our get-togethers.
And I did go on your website earlier today, your members' website, and it is a fascinating website, Richard. And it is loaded with topic. So if there's anything UFO or anything even closely related, you've got it there with your members. We've
organized the menu by topic, part of it. So yeah, if there's anything that you're interested in, I've just select the topic and it'll take you right there. In fact, Tracy and I we're re-skinning the website. I think that's the phrase. We're giving it a new look. It doesn't yet have it, but it will, and it'll be nicer still. We're really excited about it.
Okay, great. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Richard, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will have another program next week with another special guest. And so please join us here on Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, and good night.